Welcome to the Recruiting Stories Podcast, where we celebrate recruiting by exploring the stories of leaders and top performers by digging into their stories and understanding how recruiting has impacted their journey and their success. All right, everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Recruiting Stories Podcast, powered by Cover 3 Consulting. I'm your host, Adrian Chapman, and our guest today is John Powell, VP of Logistics at PT Brokers. John, thanks for joining us.
Hey, no problem, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you here. So, wanted to just start, for those who don't know, tell me a little bit about your role and who PT Brokers
Sure. PT is a 3PL that started off back in 99. We're celebrating our 25th year this year. For 21 of those years, it was very much a bulk-focused company, starting out servicing local farms and areas like that in Mississippi. And over the years, we've grown to expand that from just hoppers to every mode of bulk transportation, tankers, walking floors, end dumps, belts. And about 4 to 5 years ago, we started getting involved in the general freight market, and we've been growing that direction as well. I started off as an agent for PT and have been able to be a part of a lot of the really fun things that have been happening for the past 6 years. Moved to the Mississippi office, became a dispatcher, then a team lead, then the director of business development, and ultimately been seated at the vice president area for, I think, going on 2 years now, 2.5.
That's awesome. So I want to talk back more than about your recruiting story, how you ended up there.
Sure.
So PT being in the bulk space for you, you're not from Mississippi. You're not from the South originally, or where are you from?
I am from the South. I was born and raised in Arkansas, and did a small stint of technical school in Houston, Texas. Came back to Arkansas, then spent about 2.5 years in Nebraska, and then back to Arkansas. And after my agent and transition into the dispatcher role, I moved to Cleveland, Mississippi at our headquarters there. Mm-hmm. Our corporate headquarters is in Cleveland. And then
big metropolis of Cleveland.
That's right. Big, thriving, booming town. And we opened up the Nashville office that I'm currently in on Valentine's Day of 22. So we just celebrated our 2nd year here.
That's super cool. So let's talk. I'm going to shoot back to how you got into freight. Because I'm curious how, you jumped into the industry, because so many of us, it's not many of us, we weren't studying to go to school. It wasn't like we were born and bred for it. So tell me about how you kind of landed in transportation.
Yeah, I know what you're getting at. It's pretty often all of us that are in the industry, you tell people what you do, and then you are automatically going to have to follow that up with what it means and what is that job? I've never heard of it. It's not something that shows up at career fairs, unfortunately, which I'm hoping that we can see that change. But interestingly enough, my mom and I have a joke that I've been doing this since I was in the womb, because whenever she was pregnant, she worked for a relatively large at that time truck broker called Harold Ives out of Arkansas.
Yeah.
And, I spent the majority of my life with my mom in transportation as a broker. Yeah. And it never occurred to me to go into the industry at all. Now, my dad was a tractor mechanic, and of course, that made me think, I'll just be a tractor mechanic like that. But I never thought about following in mom's footsteps. Mm-hmm. So she was working for a small trucking company that had a leasing company as well as a logistics company. And she asked me if I knew anybody that would want to be a dispatcher. And I said, well, I'll try it. And that was the start of my transportation journey. Before that, the only logistics experience I'd had was running a scale house at a biodiesel plant in my hometown. So
that's cool. So you're one of those who it was truly in the family. And
yes.
Gave you your mom recruited you.
Yeah.
You have her to blame.
That's right. And she likes to, we have a function that we go to every year in my hometown. It's a demolition derby. And it started off as just kind of trying to let everybody see where I was from. I loaded up and took everybody. We got a duck club, and we rented it out for the weekend. And Took everybody to the Derby and the county fair, and they enjoyed it so much. Now it's an annual thing. We go back all the time. And my mom normally makes it there, and she'll be sure to tell everybody that she's the one responsible for this, and she'll gesture in my direction. But I definitely catch myself emulating her very, very often. Communication has been a part of logistics since it started. And even though my mom was doing it whenever cell phones weren't necessarily a thing and drivers were still going around with a pocket full of quarters and payphones on Denny's tables, but, I can remember how she had such a personable attitude every time she was on the phone. And I definitely know that she's my inspiration for things like that.
That's cool. Sounds like she's an awesome lady.
She's fantastic. She really is.
For you to learn all that from her. And I could certainly agree, man. I always say that one of the most underrated parts of hiring is likability. You want to like who you work with. You want to like the clients that you have. And if you just have a quality of likability, it helps so much. I mean, it's just like, I want to fight for that person. I want to get them a better rate. I want to do more work with them if they're just kind and likable and they care. So I think that's great. That's cool. So let me ask you this. Did you think when you started there, you talked about, dispatching and things like that. Did you fall into the bulk side of things? Because that's something that people don't hear about a lot at least in my world, right?
Sure.
A lot of people know, hey, we'll talk about full truckload. We'll talk about LTL, there's freight tech that's out there. But bulk is a little bit smaller community. So how did you kind of fall into that world? And, why do you, I know you care about it a lot, and PT is a big part of that world. So.
Yeah. So I actually started off with the company that I started with. We had about 12 to 14 hoppers, and if I remember right, 15 to 18 box vans. And I had about 2 days of training, and I was running all of them. Okay. So we actually worked really closely with a broker that ran all of our bulk equipment. And so I spent the majority of my learning on the general freight side. Okay. And we went through a few changes that put me over into bulk. And whenever I transitioned to the next job that I took and path of my career, it happened to line up with it. But I've always found it more to my liking. It's not that it's any better or any worse, but it's definitely, like you said, it's very niche, and it's a pretty tightly knit community. Even those of us that are competition know each other, and there's a pretty open ability to communicate, and that's something that I've always appreciated.
Yeah. Well, we had just got a chance to see each other at the Bulk Loads conference, candidly, and I was telling someone there, and Jared Flynn and those guys, they do a great job with bulk loads and all that.
Yeah.
One of the things I was telling someone there, because I had just come from another couple of conferences, been to TIA, been to the Broker Carrier Summit, and they're great in their own right. But it was the difference for me was, in the bulk industry, there's so much more of just a community feel. Like we're in this together. We're serving more of a community that just seems to be more tight knit. Seems to be more grassroots, and a community is just a word that I think of over and over when I think of the bulk industry. So.
That's a very fair assessment, and I think, and of course, leave it to the Southern guy to say this, but I think a lot of it has to do with how ag rooted our world is. Mm-hmm. The town that I'm from, population of 3,200 if you count everybody's pets, and it's just a really big farming community. And for the longest time, the only thing I knew about a big truck was a hopper hauling grain to an elevator. And, it wasn't until I got older that I realized that there's different types of trailers and equipment. But most of the guys that are in our sector, it's not uncommon for them to have their own farm. It's not uncommon for them to have been raised in the industry. It's not uncommon for there to be enough of an education that even if they haven't had all of the years of experience, they can count on their dad's experience, their grandpa's experience. Yeah. And, it does tend to make everything a lot more relatable to form that sense of community.
Yeah. 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 It's something I've always related well to, growing up in one of those types of towns as well. And my grandpa was he's a livestock trader. And so you got to move stuff, you got to move animals from one place to another. And so how are you going to do that? And it's just different. It seems that there's just a unique quality of people that are within that space. So I love.
They're very proud in the best of ways. I don't mean that in a negative moniker whatsoever, but whenever you've been in bulk, and it's interesting because a lot of people that make the switch, as we would call it, from general freight over to bulk are a little bit nervous because they don't know much about it. But it's arguably one of the best industries where you can come in and be like, I'm new. And everyone you talk to will be happy with that and fine to explain things to you. And even at the customer level, it's just a lot of what we do. All transportation is important. But whenever you think about the requirements for bulk, especially with PT, one of our biggest focuses is feed ingredients. Mm-hmm. So if we aren't handling human food directly, a lot of times we're touching something that will end up feeding someone. Yeah. And that definitely gives you a lot of pride. Yeah. Knowing that, every part that we play is potentially feeding someone. Yeah. That's a really big deal.
Yeah, I would assume that there's both a pride and a responsibility.
Oh, right? Yeah, absolutely. So,
you can do this well.
There's a lot that goes into it that, of course, you have everything that you deal with on the reefer side of things that you may not deal with on the van side of things. But in our world, it's very common that you have to be mindful of your previous product. Is it going to be any kind of cross-contamination? Do you need to wash out your trailer? On the tanker side of things, do you need a kosher certificate? Do you need to have a food grade tanker? All of those types of things. I mean, the last thing that any of us want to do is to deliver less than perfect service, but you definitely don't want to impact what's going to be goods for an end user somewhere.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
A lot of responsibility goes into that for sure, but
it makes it more meaningful.
That's true.
Yeah. Talk to me about kind of your recruiting philosophy now. I think obviously, we recruit in the industry, and I think responsibility when I think of recruiting, because I always tell people, recruiting changes lives, and so I always take that responsibility in a big way. You built a great culture, you and Michael over there, with PT and culture is a big thing. How you guys hire, how you guys train people, and you've got a big part about that. Tell me a little bit about what that looks like. Do you have a recruiting philosophy or a cultural philosophy that you guys adhere to?
I would say that we do. One of the things that I've been focusing on, and this honestly, it might just be a pearl of wisdom for anybody listening, but I'm very mindful of pronouns used whenever I'm doing an interview. How many times do I hear I and me versus we and us? Mm-hmm. Part of our culture is definitely centered around teamwork. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be, I guess, too cliche. Every place that ever talks about how they work, they say they're a family. Sure. And so I try and avoid it because I don't want to cheapen that. I would rather people figure that out once they get here. Mm-hmm. I think that the company sells itself without me having to mention it. It's just kind of an added bonus. But a lot of what we look for in recruiting is people's ability to be team players. Mm-hmm. I can work with anyone who can work with anyone. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what it comes down to is, we're in sales, right? And everybody wants to have that whale hunter that's going to go out and do everything. But if they're doing it by themselves and it's important that they do it by themselves, this is probably the wrong environment.
Yeah, sure.
We have people that have blossomed in that environment, but I would argue that everyone has done better with our shift of focus on teamwork. Yeah. In the past 4 years, the first 2, we spent perfecting our pay and the commission structure that we have. And then the 2 years following that, with us having this office in Nashville, one of the things that was very important to me was the culture. I wanted money's what brings people in, culture is what makes them stay. I'm a firm believer in that. And, uh, you know, for that ties directly into our philosophy. Our biggest thing is that we want to have the right people here that can benefit from what we offer. And personally, I want to witness the biggest change of life that I can.
Mm-hmm.
We have people that are here that I know for sure, and they have said before, it's on our website. We've got a really fantastic video where they talk about it. But the opportunities that people have been given from working at PT have allowed everybody here to have a substantial life change.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we keep showing up every day. Myself, for sure. That's my biggest draw. I love the customers. I love the industry, but my heart is in management of my people. And I'm always grateful whenever, we set goals that are very specific. We don't just put numbers on it. It's like, what do you want to do? And I had somebody say, well, I want to get a new car. Okay, well, what's it going to take for that to happen? This much. By when? And that's the thing that I love to celebrate.
Yeah, that's good. I love that. I think culture is so huge. And you you mentioned family earlier. It made me think, like, I know there's everybody's worried about family, and they talk about it on LinkedIn a lot lately, and like, this family is, toxic and all that stuff. I'm like, I had a good family experience growing up, and so I'm not, I would say, like, some of the best teams I've ever been on really did feel like a family for me.
Yeah.
And so, I didn't walk in the door saying, oh, this is my family just because. But by the time I left, it did feel like family. And, I tell people, I think about my college football teams, a couple of those, brothers that I made for life. And I feel the same about a couple of companies, not all of them, right? But if you do it right, I think by the time you leave, it may really end up that you have brothers and sisters and people.
Oh, absolutely.
For life. And like you said, when you see that life change, that's why I think, in my opinion, is we're working towards a common goal, right? And when we see people win, man, there's nothing I love more than seeing, my teammate doing well, getting that new car, buying the house, hitting their sales goal, bringing on that new customer. Like, I couldn't be more thrilled for you. And that just, it should permeate. I mean, should motivate everybody else as well.
I actually got to say that this week. We had someone who broke a record on the commission side of things.
Cool.
And that was what I got to say in the email is I love having to pay record-breaking commissions because it's so exciting.
Yeah.
Like, there's not much more that keeps you jazzed about what you're doing than watching one of the people that you're trying to support excel. Mm-hmm. And that's, I mean, whenever you can't, you definitely feel it. So whenever you do, you got to make sure you celebrate it. I mean, you're guaranteed a roller coaster with logistics anyway. It's going to have its ups and downs. You got to celebrate every one of those ups whenever they come. Yeah,
that's good. That's good. I love it because, I mean, I've always said, like, a good leader, they want to pay you. Like, they want to pay you. If you're doing your job, then they're going to say, of course I want to, give you that big commission check. Of course I want to give you that big raise, as long as we're hitting the goals and earning it, show me and I'll do it. So I love that. Well, cool. So talk to me then, what's, the market's been rough, right? I was just reading a FreightWaves article before we got on here, and it was saying, something like the market's down like at least 10% year over year. And right now there's really no, at least in freight, maybe in the greater economy, there might be some signs of life, right? But as far as freight demand, there's not like I think there's general like hope that it's going to like flip, but the data is kind of just here, so in a market like this, how do you both survive, and also thrive as an organization?
Yeah. I think we've all been saying that it can't get much worse for about a year and a half, and we're wrong every time we say it. But realistically, it's, we have done well, even in light of what's happening. And I think that the key thing to remember is that our job is not just sales, it's also service. Mm-hmm. So you have to make sure that you're staying on top of your existing business as well as your new business. And you can't let anything slip. As soon as we noticed that the market was trending, we went to some of our customers and we're like, where can we improve?
Yeah.
It wasn't that they were dissatisfied. We just wanted them to know that we were conscious of their overall satisfaction.
Yeah.
And so everybody that was able to give us feedback, we started tracking. And it's like, even if it was something that any other day would have been an intangibility, we wanted to make sure that it was something that we could quantify and do better.
Right.
On top of that, I think that our structure that's very specific to PT and the way that we allow teamwork and encourage collaboration, even on the commission side of things, I think that that's beneficial too. I just got done talking about how you don't ever want to be alone. And we like to have people here that are part of a collaborative unit. So it gives you so much more backing to go out and try and secure something or do something outside of your comfort zone whenever you know that you have help. And, from a lot of different angles, we could talk about how the difficulty of asking for help. Even that word, a lot of people, I saw an article, I cannot cite it, but I read an article the other day that was talking about how people don't even use the word help because it's such a negative connotation. But, that's something that we try to encourage. Like, if you need help, ask. It's much better to have asked than to have needed it and not said anything. So, but I think that it's definitely doable. And riding out the unfortunate trends, I've been telling everybody here, and of course, now that I say it, it's going to be on the podcast. It won't happen, but I do think that we're going to see an uptick in June. Everything that I've been seeing is kind of leaning that way. We've had some very successful RFPs. We had some very good bids on the bulk side of things. And I do think that we're going to start seeing the results of those. Now, some of it doesn't go live until later in the fall.
Sure.
But, it's not even about pounding the phones and those type of things, which of course do go hand in hand. And you can't be in the sales environment if you're not being aggressive, right? But I think that we have tried our best to focus on the consumer, on the customer. We're trying to make sure that the engagement they get with us is better than they would have anticipated.
I love those answers. A couple of things that stood out to me that you said were like, one, let's go to the customer, right? Let's focus on, hey, what are you feeling and what could we do better, right? So self-assessing through that process of like, hey, we know that it's a unique market. What could we do better to make sure that we're giving you the best service possible? And I think it's so good because that's hard. Because I don't, do I want to look in the mirror, and see what we could do better? Like, that's a tough thing. But then at the same time, you talked about your own team as well, to talk about teamwork. And morale is huge in this time, right? And
Absolutely.
I mean, we've looked at all the different articles that come out, and there's the layoffs, and then there's the shuttering of different, brokerages or trucking companies, et cetera, in the market. And, you start to see that, and it could be easy to say, hey, I'm going to get spooked or worried or all of these things out there. And to kind of rally your people together and say, hey, you've got a team. We're doing this together. Let's focus. I think that's so important to kind of rally the troops and keep people's morale up. So
absolutely.
It's good stuff.
And realism has a part to play in it as well. I mean, let me just throw stones at the imaginary other managers that are potentially listening. But there's a difference in going to your teams and saying, numbers are down. We got to get an increase. You're trending this direction. Make it better. Right. There's a difference in that approach and saying, we know things are hard. We have an expectation of the level of rise we would like to see. Right. And we're here to show you how to do it. And I think that's what resonates the most. Some of the people that I've got in the Nashville office love to point out, because a few of them have a common previous manager. And it was always, hey, do better or else. And what I consider it a personal failure, and I feel like a lot of the people that are in leadership do as well, if we can't give direction with the ask that we have. So if there's an increase needed, how am I going to show them where to get it from? And I think that has helped as well.
Yeah. What's my part to play?
Right.
In the improvement. That's good. It's awesome. Well, good. This has been an awesome conversation. John, let me ask you this as we kind of work towards wrapping up, right? We don't know what the next 6 months or year is going to look like, unfortunately. But I do think that some of the principles you've talked about are super important for anybody in transportation. And as they build teams, something I talk about a lot is how do we build a good and solid team. For you, where you are today, if you had to look back at your 20-year-old self and give yourself advice, what kind of advice would you give yourself at this point on this?
Man. That's always so slippery, mainly because of watching the movie Butterfly Effect whenever I was younger. I'm like, man, if I like where I'm at, I don't want to go back and mess it up.
Yeah, sure.
I would like to think that I would tell myself something encouraging. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't alter anything. I love the path that has gotten me to where I'm at. Mm-hmm. Everything that's been difficult has been worthwhile. My wife and I used to have this thing that we would say all the time that was, every experience is a learning environment, and from every environment, knowledge is gained. Mm-hmm. And I believe that with every part of me. But I do think that I would have told myself that you sleep a lot better whenever you do what you know is your best. It doesn't matter what the outcome is, so long as you gave it everything that you have.
Yeah.
The regrets that we all have to live with don't need to be about the should have been, might have been. Mm-hmm. It needs to be about the I did or I didn't.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's good. It makes me think, and this leads into the next question well, because what you said makes me think of a book that I love called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. And, it's great because I've used it a lot in life and business, but part of it is to kind of defining your wildly important goals. And then basically you reverse engineer that to a point where what are the actions I need to take consistently to reach said goal? And then, for me, what you said is, if I did my best to do those actions, I can go to bed at night, and put my head down and sleep, whether or not the outcome is ideal, because I know that at some point, either it's outside my control or I did the work that it took, and it'll come eventually. Right. So I love that. So going to that side of things, what books, are there any books that have been beneficial to you on your journey that have been impactful?
There's the only one that's coming to mind immediately, because I tend to hopefully like the listeners that are on this right now, I do more listening while I'm driving than I do reading, and I need to do better about that. But I would say that there's one. Let me grab this book.
Yeah, go for it. If you're like me, I've got stacks of books that I've read one chapter of, but I haven't finished. Or I get two chapters into it, and I'm like, okay, I've got the general idea, and then I leave it there. So
that's right. Well, the one that has probably been the most impactful, but not along my journey, but I would say in the past year, is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Mm-hmm. Fantastic read. And I haven't even, like you said, it's not that I gave up. It's just I got so much out of the first few chapters that I sat it down and let it soak in for a while. Mm-hmm. And I can't wait to finish it, actually. But it's been enlightening, especially considering that my wife and I like to watch a lot of crime shows like The Mentalist and stuff like that. And Chris was a FBI negotiator turned salesman. So pretty interesting standpoints.
Yeah, it seems like you might negotiate in transportation every now and then.
Just a little. But, other than that, a lot of my journey, I would give credit to my wife, realistically. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've been able to get so far into what we've done, and she's been with me every step of the journey, from everything that I've told you about. We got married while our joke is while we were young and knew everything. We were 19 and 20.
Funny how that worked out.
She's my rock, man. She's been helping me out and been the support system that has been absolutely necessary for me. But um, being here, being at PT, it's arguably the best environment that I could have hoped for. Leadership, ownership, Michael Timms uh, has given me more opportunities than I would have ever imagined, and allowing me the ability to grow something, to be a part of something so much bigger than myself. Mm-hmm. And I would have never expected to be this impacted by all of the change that's happened.
That's good. And it sounds like that's something that you've taken and you've transferred within your own leadership to those that are around you as well.
I'd hope so. I would. Being positive is a huge thing for me. And I would argue that it's what I would say is one of my strengths is positivity. Mm-hmm. But, it's important to not just tell people to be successful, but to foster that success, to make sure that you've created the right environment, that you've given the right tools. And that's what we've been focusing on. That's why, you did a post not too long ago on LinkedIn and said, where's the most awesome place to be? And I was like, it's right here. Because, man, I'm super proud of what we've got going on. And it's not just, obviously I'm here, but everyone that I talk to, whenever we are doing recruiting and we're talking to people that are in a different environment, or after people have been here for a little bit and they can open up about their last job, that kind of thing. We've got a lady working for us right now who I can't tell you how many times she's been so grateful and heavy with thank yous, because she says that she gets the support here that she's never known. And that is a real feather in the cap. Whenever you know that people aren't just happy, they're not just content, they're not just paid well, they feel supported. Because you can do anything if you feel great about it. And if you know that people have your back. And I love that we have that going for us.
No, I love to hear that. And you can hear it in your voice, but it kind of goes back to that conversation, go back to the family conversation we were talking about earlier. But like when you feel like that person has my back, I know this person's going to fight for me. It gives you a whole new freedom to say, I'm also not afraid to fail either, right? I'm gonna give it a go. I'm gonna give this my all, because I know somebody's got my back, and if I do screw up, I'm not gonna get destroyed over it. Somebody's gonna teach me. They're gonna educate me. They're gonna help me rather than pull the plug on me immediately. And everything has a fuse, right? But knowing that I've got support is crucial. So I love to hear that. That's awesome.
Super cool. I think that whenever you share in everything, you multiply it. I think that you share in the success, you also share in the failure, but you teach each other so much, and you get to be better the next time. And you're right there whenever you talked about being afraid to fail. That's probably one of the biggest things that people in sales deal with, not just in transportation, but what if I do this wrong? It took me years, and I still wish that a lot of my people were as confident in themselves as I am in them. And, their whole thing is, well, I don't want to mess it up. Well, it's okay if you do. It's an approach. It's an email. It's a phone call. Learn something. And so long as you give it your best and you've given it the appropriate and necessary service and attention to detail, you're fine.
Yep. I had a college football coach, two kind of different experiences early on, like my first year. It was one of those where, like, if I made any mistake, I got yanked out and I got screamed at. The following couple different coaches over the next few years, it was, tell me what you're seeing or why you didn't react to that, or why I know you're capable of doing this, so why didn't it happen? Or I believe you're better than this, so make the mistake. I would rather see you make the mistake 100 miles an hour than not do anything at all. And that changed how I played, my whole mentality from then on out, because I was like, well, I've got to at least take action. And for me, kind of hearing that I had the confidence in the coach behind me, it makes all the difference. And I think it starts with that environment that you're in. So it's good.
Absolutely.
Well, great conversation, John. If people want to learn more about PT, or they just want to get in contact with you, what should they do?
Well, our website is ptbrokers.com. We also have been doing more on our LinkedIn. I can be found on LinkedIn as well, or they can email me, John, John, at ptbrokers.com.
Cool. Awesome. I appreciate the conversation, John. We'll have you back again another time.
All right, man. Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Recruiting Stories podcast. If you haven't yet, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Check us out on LinkedIn, Adrian Chapman, and Cover 3 Consulting is our company page. Also check out our website, www.cov3consulting.com. Again, thanks for joining us, and we just simply want to remind you that you can change the world by putting people in a position where they can do the most good, and you do that by recruiting. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time.